So Google has finally officially launched its Pixel 7a smartphone, packing some top specs for a more affordable price than its flagship siblings. The Pixel 7a will cost you just £449 versus 549 quid for the Pixel 7 and 849 GBPs for the Pixel 7 Pro. Although the Pixel store has constant sales and discounts, so that information is probably already out of date by the time I finish this sentence. So which Pixel is best for you in 2023? Let's do a full side-by-side comparison of the camera tech, the game, and all the good stuff. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now line the Pixels up in price order and you'll find that just like the Samsung Galaxy S23 series, they are also rather pleasingly in size order. The Pixel 7a is the baby of the bunch at just 6.1 inches versus the 6.3 and 6.7 inch Pixel 7 and Pro. Of course, the Pixel 7a also has the chunkiest bezels of this trio. The Pixel 7, not much better, but the Pro, definitely the winner here, especially as that screen slopes around the edges just to minimize the bezels there. Apart from that, similar design up front with the centrally positioned selfie cam orifices. Although there is one more difference that you can't actually see, that's the fact that you've got Gorilla Glass Victus coating the screen here on the Pixel 7 and Pro, which is pretty shatter resistant, compared with the older Gorilla Glass 3 here on the Pixel 7a. Having said that, even Gorilla Glass Victus tends to scratch up rather easily, so I would highly recommend slapping a screen protector of some description on all of these buggers. Now if you flip all the pixels over, you'll see they share, again, a very similar design, but there are some subtle differences. Now I rather like Google's Pixel design. It is distinctive and iconic. Here on the Google Pixel 7a, you do have a placky back. It's full plastic there, apart from the aluminium frame and the camera bump. Whereas here on the Pixel 7 and the Pixel 7 Pro, it's once again metal for the camera and the frame, but you've also got Gorilla Glass Victus covering the rest of the arse, so again, highly shatter resistant. All of these Pixels are available in black and white, and there's generally one or two more colourful options to jazz things up a bit, like this here sea blue effort on the Pixel 7a. Only problem is that shiny surface tends to get a bit smudgy, so you'll have to be constantly buffing them up to make them look all nice and neat. And all three of these Pixel blowers are water and dust resistant as well. You've got IP67 rating on the Pixel 7a, IP68 on the other two, but basically all three can be dropped in a bathtub, a hot tub, whatever else, and survive the encounter. Right, so now let's talk about software, baby. Let's talk about Android 13. Sorry, that'll be the only time I sing in this video, I promise. And this bit's going to be super easy because it's essentially the same feature set on all three. They all use a pleasingly stock version of Android 13, complete with those lovely Pixel exclusive features. The likes of the call screening, which is absolutely ruddy fantastic. And with all three of these phones, you're guaranteed years and years of security updates and Android OS updates, and they will be among the very first smartphones to get that Android 14 update when it comes later in 2023. When it comes to security and privacy, they really can't be touched as well. Got the likes of the excellent privacy dashboard, which shows you exactly what your apps have been up to in the background, so they can't get up to any shindiggery. And Google has shoved its Titan M2 core processor into all three of these Pixels as well, so that'll store all of your sensitive bits in an encrypted form. And all three, from the Pixel 7a all the way up to that Pixel 7 Pro, sport an in-display fingerprint sensor. It's an optical sensor, but it works well as long as your fingers aren't grubby or wet. And you do always have Face Unlock as a backup now, thank the baby Jesus. And Google is constantly adding excellent new features. So for instance, you've now got a VPN built into Google One to prevent any location tracking shenanigans. So no matter which Pixel you choose, you're guaranteed a satisfying stock Android experience. As for the storage, well, it's 128 gigs here on the Pixel 7a. You can upgrade that to 256 on the Pixel 7. And then on the Pixel 7 Pro, there's even a ½ TB option. However, none of these Pixel 7 series smartphones offer micro SD memory card expansion. Those SIM trays only have room for a single physical SIM, no second SIM, and definitely no micro SD. But all three of these Pixel phones do at least offer eSIM support, which is particularly handy if you're buggering off abroad for a week or two. You can just get a temporary SIM to see you through that time. So now let's chat display tech, and it is an OLED panel on all three of these Pixels, but a drastically different size, of course. A few other key differences as well. You got Quad HD plus resolution on that Pixel 7 Pro, so even though it is an almighty 6.7 incher, those visuals are still nice and crisp, 3120 by 1440, compared with the Full HD plus resolution on the other Pixels, 2400 by 1080. You've got HDR streaming support on all three, as you would expect, so HDR10 in the likes of Netflix. The Pro's display is slightly brighter than the other two, however, so better for that outdoor visibility, but there's not a massive gulf between the three. And you'll also find that the Pixel 7 Pro's is slightly more creamy smooth with a 120Hz refresh rate versus 90Hz on the Pixel 7a and the Pixel 7. Not that my knackered old peepers can notice any difference whatsoever. It's definitely more of a jump from 60 to 90. And personally, I've found that those colours are slightly colder on the Pixel 7a versus the 7 and the 7 Pro, but you can actually tweak the colour output in the display settings if you want to, so no worries there. And you've also got a stereo speaker setup on all three of these phones, slightly louder on the 7 and the 7 Pro versus the 7a, but the clarity stays strong even when you bump that volume all the way up to the maximum levels. And sadly, no, there is no headphone jack on any of Google's latest blowers, but you do have dependable Bluetooth streaming support if you fancy a bit of that, with support for all of the usual codecs, including a bit of high-res audio action. So now they're all a tasty matter of performance, and there's not really much in it at all because all three of these smartphones are powered by Google's Tensor G2 chipset, a collaboration with Samsung. You got slightly more memory on the Pro model, 12 gigs versus 8 gigs on the other two. But certainly the everyday experience is silky smooth on all three of these handsets, helped along by the fact that it's a gorgeous stock version of Android, no clunky launchers chucked on top, and gamers will be more than happy as well. You've got a Mali GPU upgrade in the G2, which is 20% more efficient and more powerful versus the original Tensor chipset. So all three of these smartphones can happily handle even the most crotch-thrustingly demanding titles such as Genshin Impact on those higher detail settings. No, it's not always a super fluid experience as you would get with the likes of a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 smartphone. The occasional little drop in the frame rates when things get a little bit mental, but overall still highly playable, and you can always bump down the graphics settings a bit if you do want something that's going to be a bit more stable. And while all three phones can get a little bit warm at times, shall we say, I've not noticed any performance throttling, and they certainly don't get so hot that they are ever in risk of shutting down or melting your flesh. Google has also slapped its game dashboard tool on all three of these bad boys, which adds a small number of features like notifications blocking. You can stream to YouTube live. Nothing particularly thrilling, but it's a start. And no worries on the connectivity front. You've got 5G support as well as Wi-Fi 6E, and I haven't had any issues whatsoever with the networking on any of these phones. Now, because of the size differences, there's also a difference in battery capacity, although not a massive one between the 7 and the 7a, which sport around a 4,400 mAh capacity cell, versus the almighty 5,000 mAh cell of the Pixel 7 Pro. Now, fine, I get all day life on the Pixel 7 and the Pixel 7 Pro, no worries at all. The Pixel 7a, when I first started testing it, I was a bit worried because it was running dry at around sort of 7-8 p.m. every evening, but thankfully, after that first week, it seems to have settled down a bit, so now I'm getting closer to sort of 5 to 6 hours of full-on screen time, even with plenty of camera play and a good bit of Deezer and Audible streaming in the background. So it looks like all three of these will do you just fine, even if you're on your phone a fair bit throughout the day. And that battery percentage seems to tick down at a very similar rate when you're streaming video, so you get hours and hours of Netflix playback. The Pixel 7a charges rather slowly, unfortunately, with its lethargic 18-watt wired charging support versus the 30-watt charging on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro. But the good news is all three of them at least support wireless charging, even that plastic Pixel 7a. So let's finish up this three-way with a bit of a squint at the camera tech, and while you've got a 50-megapixel Octa PD Quad Bayer camera setup on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro, the Pixel 7a goes with a 64-megapixel Sony IMX787 sensor, and all three boast a bit of optical image stabilization. Now you got the same Pixel camera app on all three of these blows, so a very similar shooting experience with pretty much the same set of features. And in a completely blind comparison test, you would honestly struggle to tell whether it was a flagship Pixel or that Pixel 7a that took a specific shot, as long as the lighting conditions are on CAC, of course. All of these Pixels boast the same image processing smarts courtesy of that Tensor brain. So even though the 7a uses a different sensor from the other two, you get very similar tones and textures. All of my samples were packed with fine detail, whatever the Pixel, and all of them cope well with sharp contrast. However, those flagships do have a couple of advantages over their cheaper sibling. For one, there's a world of difference in lower light. You certainly lose some of that warm color tone in more ambient environments. And while the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro can practically see in the dark, capturing accurate tones and crispy detail, the 7a's pics are considerably more grainy with lots of noise. And also, I have found that the focus on the Pixel 7a is slightly less reliable than on those flagship phones. I have had the occasional fuzzy pick when dealing with a moving subject, something I haven't seen with the other two phones. And the Pixel 7 Pro has a pretty big advantage over the other two, namely a 48 megapixel telephoto shooter, again with OIS, capable of 5 times optical zoom. This makes a serious difference when you're a distance away from your subject, as the Pro can get you much closer to the action, maxing out at 30 times zoom, while the others top off at 7 or 8 times digital zoom. And that is absolutely fantastic for getting closer to the action when you are shooting cats, kids, whatever. You can catch them naturally dicking about without getting right up in their grill. And you've also got an ultra wide angle option on all three of these Pixel phones. It's a 12 megapixel effort on the 7 and the 7 Pro. It's a 13 mega on the Pixel 7a. And certainly all three are fine for grabbing a more eye-catching shot or cramming lots of stuff into a single frame. One of the only other differences you've got between these blowers is the fact you've got a macro autofocus here on the Pixel 7 Pro. Great news if you like getting really up close with your subject. Besides that, you've got the same basic set of camera modes, including of course the obligatory portrait mode. You've only got the long exposure mode here on the regular Pixel 7a versus the motion mode, which includes both long exposure and action pan on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro. But personally, I found those modes are a bit bold, so I don't really bother with them. And you've also got the cinematic mode on the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro, which is supposed to blur out the background similar to the portrait mode, but I found it doesn't really work very well. So again, not too gutted that that's missing in action here on the Pixel 7a. As for video, well, all three of these Pixel 7 series blowers are absolutely fine when it comes to shooting home movie footage. You can capture up to 4K resolution video at 30 or 60 frames per second. All three do a solid job with respectable image stabilization. Again, some focal issues on the Pixel 7a, a little bit of focal popping here and there. But all three are excellent when it comes to the audio capture. You can expect crisp, clear vocals, even with a fair bit of background shindiggery. And then last up, my favorite, the selfie camera, and it's a 10.8 meg selfie shooter on the Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro versus a 13 mega here on the Pixel 7a. They're all fixed focus, and they're all okay, if unremarkable. They do all tend to struggle in inclement conditions if it's a little bit dark or the background's quite bright. So overall, if you are a selfie fan, I'd say maybe just look elsewhere, to be honest. And that right there, in a lovely little nutshell, is how the Pixel 7a stacks up against the Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro. And certainly the 7a and the 7 share a lot of smartphone DNA. There's very little to choose between them. However, there's no denying that the Pro is some sexier tech versus its more affordable siblings. You got the likes of the telephoto camera, you got that extra memory and storage, Quad HD Plus display, quite a few little upgrades. But of course, with those upgrades comes a big bump in the asking price as well. So which Pixel 7 series smartphone are you most tempted by? It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. Check out my full Pixel 7a review, which is live right now. And have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.